I'm Kyla, a Girls Right Now mentee.
And I'm Lucia, a fellow mentee. We will be your MCs tonight and are so thrilled to be here live to honor Kaitlyn Greenidge as an Agent of Change honoree. Kaitlyn's debut novel, We Love You, Charlie Freeman, was one of the New York Times Critics' top 10 books of 2016 and a finalist for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. She is a contributing writer for the New York Times, and her writing has also appeared in Vogue, Glamour, The Wall Street Journal, and elsewhere. She's also a Girls Right Now mentor alum. Her new novel, Liberty, was just published this week.
Also, thank you to everyone who submitted questions in advance for Kaitlyn. We'll be able to take one or two from you, so feel free to use the chat to ask. Now let's get going. Welcome, Kaitlyn. We're so excited to have this time to talk writing, mentorship, community, and getting unmuted with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk with both of you.
So your new book is so inspiring for all young women, Liberty. Your new book is so inspiring for all young women trying to find their identity and path in life. Liberty may have taken place in the past, but I think this book really resonates with girls, especially girls and non-binary teens my age who crave being accepted. Teenagers want to be accepted in their friend groups and on social media because society restricts us to become an impossible puppet. And I have friends who tell me their parents pressure them to study a topic they have no interest in. The main character, Liberty, breaks down the societal and familial boundaries, taking on her own destiny. She shows us what it's like to truly be unmuted and find self-freedom. So to start off tonight, I wanted to ask you how you unmute yourself in your work and your life.
That's a great question. I think it's an ongoing process for most of us to continually find courage to have our own voice and to speak up about things. And it's only something that comes from, it's a muscle that needs to be exercised constantly. So I think what can stop, especially when you're younger, what can stop you from doing that is that it can feel like, well, I don't feel confident as I'm speaking out. I don't feel confident as I'm making this decision. I'm sort of racked with doubt or confusion as I'm making this decision. So that must mean that the decision isn't worth making. And that's not true. Everybody feels that uncertainty as they speak out, especially when, especially for young girls, young non-binary folk. We are talking about, the wider culture is telling you that your voice doesn't need to be heard constantly. So when you have that added pressure, and for young people across all genders, our culture doesn't really value young voices that much, or take young voices really that seriously. So when that's the message sort of all around you, that your voice doesn't really matter, it's impossible not to take that dialogue in. And a way to unmute yourself is just to remind yourself we're all swimming in that sea of being told that our voice doesn't matter. And so the fact that you feel doubt, or the fact that you feel scared, or the fact that you feel uncertain doesn't mean that you're not supposed to speak up. That just means that you are human and you're responding to the world around you, and you speak up in spite of those things. And there's never going to be a moment in your life when those things completely fall away. As you get older, you'll enter into different kinds of rooms, different kinds of challenges, and those feelings will sometimes come back again. But hopefully by then you'll have the muscle to be able to speak up and feel more comfortable doing it.
Thank you so much. I especially love how you emphasize that, it's all about being human. That one hit a bit close to home. So our second question is, I know Lucia already kind of went in a bit about what the book is about, and so did you, but can you tell us more about your new book and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So Liberty is inspired by the story of Dr. Susan Smith McKinney Stewart, and she was the first Black female doctor in New York State. She lived in Weeksville, Brooklyn, which is basically around roughly where Crown Heights is today. And she ran her own hospital. She founded a whole bunch of different institutions. She sort of traveled all over the country, helping to found some of the earliest HBCUs, earliest historically Black colleges. She had this really great, illustrious life. She also had a daughter named Anna, who married the son of the Episcopal Archbishop of Haiti. And Anna moved to Haiti with her husband and moved in with this sort of really well-off family in Port-au-Prince. They were really a rich family, really well-known. All the sons were sort of like doctors or lawyers, except for the man that Anna married, who was more sort of had a lot of issues, a lot of troubles, was not really doing what he should have been doing. And eventually the marriage sort of fell apart. And so Anna wrote to her mother, the doctor, to say, I need to get out of here. I need to leave this country. And her mother eventually figured out how to smuggle her and her children out of Haiti and bring them back to the US. And this was in the early 20th century. You know, even today, it's really difficult for women to leave abusive situations, or for anybody really to leave an abusive relationship situation. But back then in early 1900s, it would have been even more difficult when you're trying to get somebody out of a different country. So it's kind of remarkable what this mother and daughter were able to do for each other. And for the rest of her life, the daughter would sort of tell her descendants about how much she loved the country of Haiti, even though she'd had sort of this really unhappy marriage there. She felt an intense sort of love for the beauty and the freedom that she felt in Haiti. So I did an oral history with one of that woman's descendants, who's a famous actress named Ellen Hawley, and she's written all this, her whole family history in her own memoir called One Life. That's really great. And I did an oral history with her a while back for a job that I did. I worked at the Weeksville Heritage Center, which is the museum dedicated to this community where this doctor came from. And she told me the story about her ancestors, and I thought, oh, that's such a beautiful story, and I would love to write a novel about that someday. And so that's where the beginning of the Liberty story comes from.
That's very, very interesting, because a lot of mentees here I can imagine that it required a lot of research for the mentees to create their own stories. And this is a question from a fellow mentee. Her name is Iram. And she asked, what are your day-to-day habits or mentalities to ensure you work progressively regardless of any unexpected obstacles?
Yeah, that's a really great question too. You know, I think the biggest thing is to realize that, you know, writing every day is wonderful, but for the vast majority of people and the vast majority of writers, it's oftentimes not possible, because, you know, we live really complicated and busy lives, and there may be moments in your life where things are calm enough, or you have enough of stability that you are able to write every day. But it's probably far more likely that you're going to be dealing with sort of like other things going on, or things that are sort of stopping you. And so I think the best thing is to let go of the feeling like, if I don't write every day, somehow I've let myself down, or I've let my art down, or I've let my project down, and more sort of expand what we mean when we say we are artists, or we're sort of like thinking an artistic bent, and recognize that, especially for writers, and especially for writers early on, and as you're sort of starting your artistic career, it is just as important to figure out what you're taking in as it is what you're writing down. So reading as widely as possible, figuring out what kind of books you actually, or what kind of writers you want to read, what kind of books you actually want to read, listening as widely as possible to as many different types of music that you can, looking for the visual art that you really respond to and figuring that out, just looking for the, or maybe it won't even be a piece of formal art. Maybe it's that you're really into, you know, a certain, I don't know, type of shoe that's only manufactured by this one designer, and you get really into their work and you start to try and figure this out. Maybe that's the thing that is your curiosity. But more than anything, of writing every day, it's more important to cultivate and preserve your wider curiosity about the world, so that your inspiration can be continuous and you don't necessarily get dead into that, or get sort of stuck or blocked around that stuff.
That's such great advice. I know, especially since I know from my talks with some mentees, they also struggle with the idea of having to write every day to be defined as, like, I guess, a true writer. So I think that was like some wonderful advice. And from another mentee, from mentee Sharitra, she wants to know, they want to know, how did you find your voice?
You know, I think it's a continuation of that last question. It's fine. It's following the things that interest me. And as you guys all know, the things that interest you oftentimes have nothing to do with what interests the wider world. Oftentimes it's something really weird, or something that your friends say, I don't know if I'm really into that, or like, you know, they're like, okay, I guess you're into it, but like, and we'll humor you, but like, we're maybe not really following you down that path. But you know, it's being really trusting of where your curiosity and your instinct is leading you, and that's going to help shape your distinctive voice. You know, and that can be really fun as like practice, kind of like training wheels for stuff. But to develop your own voice, you really have to develop and cultivate your own interest and your own slant on the world. And that slant on the world may be at odds with what your parents tell you should be your slant, or your friends tell you should be your slant, or your partner tells you should be your slant, or even that you're telling yourself. But if you can trust that part of you, trust that there's a reason why your mind is getting really excited about this thing that nobody else seems to really understand is really cool or really interesting, and just trust yourself and say, I'm going to keep my attention on this anyways. That's where you start to develop your own sensibility and your own voice.
Yeah, I think that really relates to this year's theme of being unmuted. And I know that being unmuted kind of for me means to, kind of, as you said, be free of judgment from others and yourself. And I feel like Girls Right Now really helps mentees and mentors to be unmuted as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's important to support a program like Girls Right Now. And I wanted to ask you why you feel it's important to support Girls Right Now's work.
You guys are the future. You're hopefully who I'm going to be reading in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years from now. You guys are hopefully going to be the ones who are on, who get written up and people say this book is amazing and you got to read it, or this poem is amazing, or this poet is amazing and you have to see them perform, or all those sorts of things. Like literature is a field that needs new voices constantly, and that's what keeps it interesting and fresh and relevant for a larger generation. And so we need more writers, we need more readers, we need you guys to be reading each other, and we need all of that to keep literature alive and to keep it a part of the rest of our culture.
I 100% agree. And seeing as we are still talking about Girls Right Now, how about this next question? We shifted to, we know how you were a mentor at Girls Right Now, and we were wondering, what do you think makes a good mentor?
I think following the mentee's lead. My mentee, she was really, her particular interest, like the thing that she loved Korean culture and Korean beauty products in particular. And I didn't know anything about Korean beauty products and Korean spa products, which that's what she wanted to talk about and write about and explore. She wasn't Korean herself, I should say. And so I said, when I first sat with her, I said, what are you interested in? She said that. And I said, okay, let's figure out the places in the city where we can go and start to explore those things up close, not just like looking at them on your phone, but like, let's actually go into a store and you can talk to some people and like figure stuff out. And those were some of our earliest outings. We just went and hung out and looked around, and she got some inspiration and started to think about sort of what was the thing that she was actually interested in. She started to figure out, like, the thing that I'm interested in is that, there's someone really close to in my life who is from Korea, and she's introduced me to this stuff. And actually my interest in this is my interest in her. And I like to talk to her, and she's actually going to be like someone who I want to write about. And that was really like a whole opening door of like what another sort of thing of learning about herself as an artist and learning about who her actual influences were in her own life. So I think as a mentor, you have to be open to what a mentee is actually interested in, and hopefully you're having conversations where both of you are figuring out what those influences that seem to sort of like come out of nowhere or seem to sort of just be floating around, where those actually come from and where they're rooted in, so that there's you start to understand your own artistic profile.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's really important to know as a mentee also, to kind of keep in mind that your mentor is here to help you. And so you kind of have to figure out yourself what your interests are too. And your mentor can obviously support you with that. And because you brought up the qualities of a mentor that makes them super great, I wanted to ask you, is there a specific mentor who changed your life?
Yeah, so many. I've been really lucky in that I've had really wonderful writing mentors throughout my life. From when I was your all's age, I had really wonderful mentors. So probably the biggest mentor who I had was there was a similar program to Girls Right Now when I was growing up in Boston. It was called Writers Express, and it started out as like a summer writing camp program, and you would go to different field trips to different places, as random places as they could think of, just so that you would have like something unexpected to write about. So I worked there as a counselor for many years, and the woman who ran it, she's been my mentor for a long time, still to this day. I ended up working with her when I was older, even after I had graduated college. I ended up coming back and working with her at a different company that she started, but I've known her since I was 12 years old, since 7th grade. And, she's still my mentor. I just texted her today to ask her some questions about things. So, it's great to cultivate those relationships.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Honestly, I hope my Girls Right Now mentor, I hope I'm still in contact with her like years later from now. I feel like it's such a special relationship. And I think especially all the mentees and mentors definitely know that in this program. And my next question is, what advice would you give a young writer who's hoping to get published?
I would say to a young writer hoping to get published, I would say, I would say take the pressure off yourself in terms of publishing. If it happens, it happens. I think it's helpful to get into the habit of submitting stuff so that you don't feel so so that you don't put so much pressure on the act of submission, of submitting your work. It's really hard to get used to submitting your work. It's still hard for me at times to get used to submitting my own work. But there are things that I have submitted to for going on 10 years now that I only just get into this year. So it's a long process in terms of submitting stuff. And I think the goal should be, especially when you're starting out, as much as possible to also be refining your work as much as possible. So you guys are in a very different publishing landscape than I was when I was your age. You have the whole internet open to you, and places that will be really eager to oftentimes publish younger writers, or writers who are a little bit know less about what's going on. And that can be okay. It can be like an opening to getting published, but it can also be not great if an editor isn't taking into account your needs and really protecting you as they publish you. So when you're submitting, when you're sort of working with a publisher, this is a very long-winded answer, but I'll wrap it up. When you're submitting and you're working with a publisher, you want to make sure that that person is looking out for you, that they're not going to have you publish something that you're going to feel bad about a year or so later, or you're going to feel like, I said something that like really maybe was insensitive, or like wasn't really what I meant, and it was hard for me to get those words. You want someone who's going to work with you to say, is this what you actually mean? Here's all the angles where someone could maybe misinterpret this. How can we make this better, and work with you to edit it so that it's really what you want to say, and you won't get sort of caught up in publishing something that you want to publish, something that you're going to be proud of, hopefully a year, 2 years, 3 years later from writing it. And oftentimes when we are writers just starting out, some of our earliest stuff, we may have been in a rush to publish it, but a year later we may say, you know what, that actually wasn't really my best, and I don't really like that piece anymore. So it's all a sort of negotiation.
This is a question from the chat from Donna. She asked, what do you consider success for an author?
Oh, that's a great question too. I think success is having a healthy dialogue with a reader, even if it's just one. I think that's good. Hopefully you're writing to be eventually read. And hopefully, I always try to remind myself that one of the purposes of a book is to start a conversation. And so hopefully you are building, and even maybe the conversation you're having is with an author who's no longer with us. Even that's okay, but hopefully you are writing in response and wanting to sort of enter into a wider world of ideas, whether they're intellectual ideas about certain things happening today, or whether they're artistic ideas about new ways to do form, or new ways to do whatever you want to do. That's what I think success is for a writer.
I think that's a really great way of putting it. And here's another question from the chat from Ruby Snyder. What is your favorite piece that you wrote, or just one that you really enjoyed writing?
Oh, that's a good question too. I think, I I had a lot of fun writing. It's a short story that's going to come out in a few weeks, or I think like next month, with Scribd, and it's a short story about going to a party during lockdown in New York, and that was really fun to write. I have not been quarantining in New York. I'm in Massachusetts. I haven't been to a party in like, you know, like 2.5 years, I think, because I have a young kid. But it was really fun to sort of imagine having a more reckless life. It was really fun to write a narrator who's making sort of reckless choices.
Oh, and this is a question from, I think, a future mentee. And I think, Kaitlyn, you can answer this kind of from a mentor's perspective. So she asked, what can I look forward to as a mentee? I'll say my response, a short response first, because we're short on time. But I would say to look forward to as a mentee is, I guess Girls Right Now kind of gave me my first mentor. And I feel like you kind of unexpectedly, or it's expectedly, but for me, it was unexpectedly, I got a really personal connection with her. And she helps me with my writing, but she also listens to my story, and I've kind of told her about my family's background, which I've never told to anyone else before. If Kyla, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I think as a mentee, you should look forward to having that support system, just like Lucia said, not just in like your personal life, but also in your writing life. And I think it's also just, I think it gives you more confidence. I know personally, because I had a mentor who was constantly working with my writing. Eventually, I got used to showing people my work, even though I have a close relationship with her. So then now I can, like, you know, I felt comfortable enough to go right now live and show everyone else my work. So that's also a really good thing.
Yeah.
And Kaitlyn, if you would like to add something on, this is our last question. So
I
go
think
ahead.
those things, you know, I think also, you know, Girls Right Now, you guys have a fantastic amount of events too. I think what you can look forward to is community too. You know, you're going to be meeting with other people who are other mentees who are interested in writing like you are, who want to be here, who want to be part of this community. And I think that's a real resource too. You know, you have mentors who are a little bit older, but of course you guys can do cross mentees. Like you guys can mentor each other. In many ways, there may be things that you guys can have knowledge and wisdom about that your mentor may not have, but other people in the group may be able to help you with.
And with that being said, I think this is a really great place to wrap up. So thank you so much again, Kaitlyn, for joining us.